Hi, this is Patsy with a Z. Welcome to Joy on Paper, a program for writers and those who dream of writing, and for everyone who wants to know the story behind the book. I am so happy to welcome to Joy on Paper Diane Prettyman. Oh, what a lovely name. That's a great name for an author. Hi, Diane.
Good afternoon.
Oh, it's
Nice to be
nice to
here.
see you. And here's a cover of your book, Love is for the Birds. And it's a beautiful cover. And of course, there's it's a romance. It's also deals a little bit with ecology and a bird. I thought I would do a little video for you just to tell people about the bird that is featured in your book. There you have it.
That's great.
Not a lot of people have seen whooping cranes. They are so beautiful. And I thought people hear about them. It is such a beautiful bird. Certainly, one of the inspirations for your book, one of the important things when an author is writing a book, it's great when you know the location. And in this case, you definitely did, right?
Correct. I'm a frequent traveler to the Texas Gulf, and the whooping crane is a beautiful bird and inspiring because they mate for life. And the male whooping cranes do this romantic dance to court their female. And so they made the perfect kind of backdrop for the Love is for the Birds story because of the romance in the story.
Tell us about the real place where the whooping cranes are, and then about your bird isle that you've created for your story.
The real place where they go each year to winter is Aransas Pass Wildlife Refuge, which is near Port Aransas, a town that was destroyed in Hurricane Harvey in 2018. And that destruction in that hurricane also inspired this book. I wanted to write about how people could build a town back together and how a man and a woman could build their lives back together while rebuilding the town.
We've just gone through these two terrible hurricanes in the East Coast and then in Florida. I myself, when I lived in Florida, I went through hurricanes and they were so terrible. It's so shocking, really, to your system. You've created this island where you have two wonderful characters and you have brought them together. Tell us about the two main characters and what the dynamics are in this isle.
Teddy Wainsworth owned a candy store on the island, and it was totally destroyed by the hurricane. She's returning to the hurricane, to the side of her shop, and along comes Jack Shaughness, the barbecue pitmaster, who came down from Fort Worth, Texas, to bring barbecue to feed the survivors of the hurricane and the people restoring the hurricane. And he runs into her as he's driving around town asking people to come and get some barbecue. And he meets Teddy and is immediately drawn to her situation. And a romance develops as they work together to restore the island and the candy store. And he is grieving the death of his wife, but it's been 5 years since she died. So I wanted to have two characters that both had some grief in their background that they had to deal with in addition to the hurricane. And so that's how they rebuild their lives while they're rebuilding the island. And it is true at Aransas Pass Wildlife Refuge, the hurricane happened in August of 2018, and the whooping cranes return every year in October. The town had to really hustle to get the Aransas Pass Wildlife Refuge cleaned up so that the birds would have food to eat when they returned to their wintering grounds. And so it is true that the whole town got together and restored the habitat so the whooping cranes could return.
It's always fun when you're creating a story to do world building. When you laid the town, did you actually do a little map and try to figure out where everyone was and what was going to be done to the town?
Exactly. Again, it's patterned after this town, Port Aransas, but I drew my own map of what Bird Isle would look like. And I make just little sketches of where each of the businesses are and where the wharf is and where the surfing shop is. And that helps me be able to create the scenes in the story by being real clear on exactly where everybody is and what everybody's doing. So many people in the town are characters in the story. So it was important that they had their own businesses too. And so I needed to know exactly where they were located on the island.
When you're writing a book, if you map it out, the location, it really does help your thought process, doesn't it?
Yes, it really organizes the scene for you for sure.
And if they're walking down this street, what direction they're going, what they're going to see, whose store they might see, all of that is very helpful. With this town, of course, you have to people the town, you have to create all these characters. Give us a little bit more background on Teddy. This candy store that was destroyed was part of her inheritance.
Yes, her mother died in a car accident, and Teddy blames herself because she had insisted her mother drive to Houston and meet her boyfriend in Houston because she was living in Houston at that time. She inherits the candy store for her mother, and she really wants to make good on it because she feels responsible for her mother's death. So when the candy store was destroyed, she has lost not only the candy store, but the last remnant of her mother. So she's very distraught. There is a candy store in this town in Port Aransas now, and I did pattern it after that candy store because it is just a delightful, magical place. And there's a bit of all books and romances have tropes in them. And there's a bit of a trope in this. You've got the girl that owns the candy store and the stranger that comes to town, Jack Shaughnessy, the barbecue pit master. And those tropes, to avoid them becoming cliche, I added the different aspects of the town, like the whooping cranes, which was very different, and also the other birds there, the pelican, the animal rescue shelter for the birds that are in that town. So I put them in the story too, to so that the trope of the candy store owner and the barbecue guy didn't become too cliche.
Of course, in Texas, the barbecue pit master, he's like a star of a town in
Yes,
Texas, isn't he?
yes.
When you're creating a character, did you see them in your mind? When you started the book, you knew what age you wanted your characters to be?
When I started it, I had Teddy being younger in their early 20s, and now they're more in their 30s and a little bit older because I want her to have a little life experience before this all happened. But yes, you start out with how old is this character? What do they look like? And make clear notes about each character and what they look like. Because when writing a book, sometimes it's hard to keep straight. Okay, did that guy have brown eyes and blonde hair, or were they tall? Were they, what nationality were there? You don't have to make sure that you draw all the characters thoroughly so that you're consistent. What I do is picture the characters in my mind and write down who they are and what they look like and what they want in their life and all of those things that are important to have in the story, but you don't necessarily say in the story.
Do you call it a story Bible or a character sheet, or what do you call it?
I keep it on an Excel spreadsheet, the characters, and then what happens in each scene and what characters in each scene, and do that on Excel.
Okay, that's a good idea.
That keeps me organized too. It's real important when writing a book to write in scenes. And then you can fill in the rest, but you need to have all of your scenes clear in your mind and make sure that all of the scenes build toward the next thing that happens.
There comes a point when you start with a character, you know them, but that they start to know you, that they invade your life.
Yes, sometimes you'll be writing a scene and the character does something unexpected that you didn't expect them to do. And that's always surprising. And it gives you an idea for what the next scene is going to be.
So you have your location, you have your characters in your case, because you have quite a few characters to deal with. How did you start this book? Did you outline it?
I map out scenes, and but I do usually start the beginning and then I start mapping out scenes after that. Usually the idea comes first, and I just start writing it and see where it goes, and then outline the scenes. In a book, the middle is the really hardest part about the book. It's easy to write the first and the last part of it, but to have all of the scenes in the middle of the book create rising tension and character arcs, that requires harder work. And you know the story about sagging middles in books and how difficult that is for authors to do that. And you've read books where you feel like it could have been edited more. That is something that can be prevented by mapping out the scenes really carefully. I don't outline extensively when I write a book. I just try to write and get what
Do you like to write dialogue?
I like dialogue a lot, but I also like describing places. It's a toss up. I like them both. And I decided to have this book written in alternating point of views between Teddy and Jack. And I've done that before in novels, and it worked. And I like to be able to get in the head of the character really deeply. And so I think those alternating point of views allow me to do that. It's a little harder to get into a man's head, of course, if you're a woman, but not necessarily. Some people have been surprised in uh, some of my books that how I was able to get in a man's head.
I think it's not quite as difficult as people like to say, because we do tend to understand men, and
Yes,
a lot of women have written great books with male characters, so I don't think we have to worry about that. Jack is a great character. He's got some really excellent points. How did you flesh him out?
I've met people like Jack, but I don't know. I don't have in mind one particular person that reminds me exactly of him. But again, he's a bit of a stereotype, the football player and loved his wife and nice guy. So I had all of those things about him, which could be dangerous because that makes him also boring, right? The what I didn't really have someone in mind when I thought of Jack. I just wanted a typical Texas guy.
When you move from one character to another, do you feel almost like a physical change in your body? I'm writing this male character. He's a lawyer, and this book is set back in the 1800s. But when I'm writing his part, I feel like I'm sitting like him. I can almost imagine how he would be sitting.
That's great. Yeah, one of the great things about writing is I feel like I notice things more in people, how they walk, how they sit, what they eat, and it helps me analyze movies more and to see how they develop the characters. It just makes you a better reader and a better moviegoer to have experience in writing, I think.
To be observant, that is
Yes.
really the essence of a great writer. They notice sometimes the
Yes.
littlest things that other people don't notice. They might notice the way somebody holds their cup. They might notice how somebody twiddles their thumbs. They notice these things, notice little things that other people don't notice. Charles Dickens, they said, was able to walk down a street, and when he got to the end of the street, he could turn around and he could tell you every building he walked by, the color of the door, what was in the windows, and who was outside, and if there was something on the ground, because he observed.
You can certainly tell it in his writing, can't you? He's a master of it.
Of your characters in the town, tell us about some of them.
I have a lady that works at the wildlife rescue. And so that was very important because there were many pelicans that were injured in the hurricane and continue to be injured in different ways at the Gulf. They have a big pelican rescue down there. So I knew I needed that person. And she also works at the wildlife refuge and was had to lead that effort. And she led the annual bird count for the whooping cranes. So that was one big character. Another character, Surfer, Walt the Surfer, was a real fun character. And I don't exactly know this guy, but I know some surfer dudes. And I wanted there to be a dude involved because every beach has one. And he is really funny and he gets into trouble every now and then. And it was important to have him because to some comic relief, I guess you could say. I also have the woman that owned the restaurant, the first restaurant to open back up. And she has a very important role in the book. And people congregate at the restaurant frequently as they're rebuilding the island.
This is the fun thing about writing. You get so much joy from the writing process, but part of the joy is developing these characters, just getting to know them because they do come into your life.
And that's how you develop your scenes, is knowing which characters are in the scene and if that character is going to advance the plot.
How long did it take you to write?
I finished a first draft of this book while I was completing a 12-week Artist's Way class. I've done that class several times, and I finished the first draft then. Once you have a first draft, really the most fun part of writing to me is editing it and adding it and perfecting it. I've had several drafts of this novel before I sent it on to publishers. So I would say I really finished it in about 3 months, the first draft.
Oh, that's good. And as you said, then the editing process comes. So first you edit it yourself, and then did you work with a writing group?
Yes, I have a writing group I've worked with for 20 years. I shared the first draft with them, of course, and shared the rewrites and worked really closely with them, trying to make decisions about what I could do and how I could make it better. We meet at least twice a month, share each other's work.
So how does that work exactly? I've been talking to some people who are going to be doing NaNoWriMo, which is the National Novel Writing Month. And when I tell them that once they finish the book, of course, there is that long editing process. You don't actually write a book in 1 month. There's a lot that comes after it. If everybody could write a book in a month, I think only one person I can think of who's actually done it. Although Robert Louis Stevenson did write the first 15 chapters of Treasure Island in 15 days. He couldn't stop. He just knew what he wanted. But by the end of 15 days, he just collapsed and had to go off to Switzerland for a rest cure before he could continue with the book. We don't want to get in that situation. When you're working with a writers group, do you read to each other? Explain to people who have never been, actually, they're afraid people will like laugh at them or judge them. I mean, a writing group, you're supposed to judge each other, but in a nice way. How does it work with your group?
Stephen King and others would say that you need to finish your first draft before you share it with anybody, but we don't have that hard, fast rule. If we get 50 pages in and we want to share it and get some feedback, we do that. And you can do that with a group you trust. You don't want to have people steer you in the wrong direction while you still have the creative process going. So that may be why Stephen King has that rule. Obviously, he's very successful. But what we do is we submit chapters or scenes and before the meeting, and people write their comments on it. And then we discuss those comments and we always try to make comments about what worked and what didn't quite work for us and places where we were confused. But you have to be careful about writers' feelings. And I've been in writers' groups where somebody left the group because they couldn't handle the criticism. So you have to really get to know the people that you work with. But a critique group is really important because if you're going to be a writer, you have to have a really thick skin. You don't want to be in a critique group that says everything that you write is just wonderful. Oh, that's just great. That doesn't help you become a better writer. You have to be willing to accept feedback. So the person receiving feedback has work to do in order to just remain open to feedback. And the people giving the feedback have to be careful how they present it and make sure that it's not subjective, but just an objective thought. And the people that are in my writing group don't necessarily write the same kind of books that I do. It's okay to have different genres in a writing group if you have the right group of people. So I would just say people we submit pages and people use the editing function on Word and send it to us online. We usually meet in person, but sometimes we do meet on Zoom.
Your writing group is acting as your beta readers as you go
Correct.
along.
Hmm.
So then, did you work with a professional editor?
The publisher proofread it. It had been pretty thoroughly polished by the time it got to the publisher. But the publisher then did a once over again, and there were very few mistakes, I was happy to say, because my writing group is such a strong group of people.
If you don't have a group to work with like you did, you do have to give it to an editor and work with the editor. And again, this is where criticism might come in, and you have to be, as you said, thick skinned. It's part of the process. And even the most famous authors, they still go through an editor.
Absolutely. I'm always impressed to hear the stories of authors that still have editors, like Kristen Hannon. I just heard an interview with her, and
Oh,
she was
yes.
talking about how heavily edited her book was.
Well, she's been a guest on my radio program many times. And
Uh-huh.
she's talked about that. And it is always surprising. An editor has this ability to spot things. And sometimes it's not just the sentence layout is something, but they see something that's missing or a point that's missing. And they say, come back to that. And so many authors have told me that just one little word from the editor saying, that's not quite clear. Can you expand that section a little bit? And that has made all the difference to the book. And it's
Right.
sometimes turned out to be the part where people will say, wow, that really moved me along in the story. Because editors do notice things, especially as you say, the middle of the book, because a lot of times you need something to move it ahead. It's a matter of either cutting something or giving that one little extra little bit to keep the readers turning the pages.
And one person in my group is particularly good at fact checking. She's just real nerdy about details. And
Oh,
you
that's
can
good.
really get caught if you write something that's wrong in a book. And because readers are very savvy, and it can spoil their experience if they find something that was the wrong date or wrong information about a specific subject.
Unfortunately, people can be very rude on Amazon reviews. And when they find
Right.
something for something really little, I've had some famous authors on my radio program, and their books are terrific, bestsellers. But
Right.
they've got these 1-star reviews, and it's for something
Right.
really ridiculous. And
Right.
it's so upsetting to them because they don't expect that. But then many times it wasn't their mistake. Now, I have one author, the global best-selling author, and she has a big mistake in her book, a big mistake. Now, the book's been out for about 3 years, and I know we talk about it. She got a location, and the distance between two locations, she has them completely off. And she's worried that somebody's going to come along and say, you can't get from here to there in an hour. No way. You can't do it. And she's waiting. She looks every once in a while at her Amazon page. It will take a reader who's actually been to those locations and driven that distance. So she's a little bit nervous. She said it's going to happen eventually, but she's hoping it's 20 years from now.
That's definitely why I made a fictional town, because I think that's important to do. And also, it's funny how many books that you'll find just a couple of little small typos. Bestseller books, I've almost always find a couple of errors in a book that I read. So it's pretty common now because publishers maybe are not as don't really maybe scrutinize books as much as they used to.
It's a combination of who's working in the publishing houses nowadays and, of course, the details. You need really people who are so detail oriented that they catch these kind of things. That's a special talent.
This was once this got to the publisher, this went back and forth being proofread at least 4 times. And then after the arc was made, there was another round of readings. I haven't found a mistake yet. If you see one, let me know. I don't know. I think we did pretty well.
I didn't catch any, and I usually catch it. My neighbor upstairs was 100 years old, the former librarian, and she would catch all of those things and she'd mark them in pencil. Very lightly, because she's a librarian, she doesn't want to ruin a book, but very lightly in
Right.
pencil she'd mark every error she found. It
That's
was very
great. I
funny,
love
but yeah.
that.
So but of course she didn't get on Amazon and give somebody a 1-star review for that, which so that's good.
Yeah, that's not an indication of the writing per se.
No.
That's at all.
But speaking of Amazon, of course, one of the things that we have to always encourage readers, please always do a review on Amazon when you like a book. It helps authors with this Amazon algorithm that everybody has to live to today, right?
Hmm. Yes. We love reviews.
Oh, yeah, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful thing to do for an author because authors work so hard on their books and sometimes so long that they deserve to hear something nice. I always encourage readers to do that. Um, and now, of course, you're in this next phase of book writing, which most people don't understand when they start writing, that it's the writing is just a very small part of being an author today.
Correct.
So, how are you going about promoting your book? You have events, you are doing things. Of course, you have a website.
I was in Port Aransas and sold my book at the little grocery store there and did quite well. I sold out, and because there's not much on the island, and there is also a little gift shop boutique that took some of my books. So they're there in Port Aransas. And then I had a big party this weekend in here in Austin where people came and we had a band and a party, but I had information about my book and a few copies of my book and bookmarks so that people could order it online or do what they needed to do. And I gave away some swag to people. So that was fun. And then I'm going to go back to the Gulf in February for the Whooping Crane Festival and have a booth there and do things online on social media to promote the book. Seems like that's what most people do. I don't know that anybody's found the magic bullet to sell books.
We're working on it. We're trying to figure out ways to promote more
Yeah.
books because we and to get to more part of why I started the YouTube channel because I've had the radio program for almost 10 years. That's a syndicated radio program, but with YouTube we can really reach people around the world, and that's what we're trying to do. And this book, I think, it's a fun. Love is for the birds. It's heartwarming. I think you've come out with a lovely theme. As you said, it's not whether it's a cozy mystery or sort of what they call a beach read. It's a book that has a theme behind it, something that you want to, first of all, tell people about. I think one of the wonderful things in your case is this eco fiction, which I think is an area that a lot of people haven't really gotten into because there are so many people who care about what's happening to our animals, to our birds, and to nature.
I wanted to reach the group of people that read like Mary Alice Monroe's books on the East Coast about the sea turtles, and her books were about that rescue program. And I always enjoyed reading those, so that inspired me to include some kind of ecological component with my book.
And Barbara Hinsky, she's been very successful because her books are all guiding Emily about guide dogs. And that's something to draw attention to the subject. And in your case, to draw attention to the whooping crane, which is such a beautiful bird. And we hope that people will read the book, be inspired, perhaps donate. They can definitely go to the Aransas Wildlife and support this work that they're doing because it is so important. How many birds did they have at last census?
I think it's around 500.
Around 500.
Mhm.
And hopefully this year there'll be more coming down from Canada. It's really amazing to think that they can fly for 500 miles just nonstop. It's it's crazy, isn't
They're
it?
they're huge. They're just magnificent, and I as doing research for this, I did boat trips into the wildlife refuge and the marshlands there, and we were able to see them in the natural habitat. It's just amazing what big birds they are. I'd love to see them doing the mating dance. That would be really cool. But they mate in Canada,
Yeah.
so they don't mate down here.
I've never actually seen one, so now that I'm in Texas, maybe I'll be down there in February when you are there. That's at the big, they have a festival, right? So that's going to be a great opportunity for you to sell your books and get to meet people. And is it fun when you do events and you meet the fans?
Yeah, I was not sure I'd like it, but I do. I didn't do it on my last couple of books, but at this time I've been more active and have a publicist helping me, and I feel I'm a little more comfortable with it than I thought I would be.
It's important. And nowadays, a thing that can kick it off is word of mouth.
Right.
And getting selfies with your fans and having them posted on their social media, that's one of the best ways to draw attention to your book. Fans, when they put it on their social media and they talk about it and people forward it and share it, that's a great way to reach more buyers for your book.
Yeah, I like Bookstagram and Instagram.
Your website, it's just Diane Owens Prettyman. That's a nice name. That's your husband's name?
Yes,
And you met him and he said, "I'm a pretty man." How exactly did he tell you his name?
I worked with him, so I knew his name. It's an English name, obviously, and he has a lot of heritage. And there's a building in Washington, D.C. named the Prettyman Building that you see on TV sometimes. But it's an unusual name, and everybody comments on it. I go by the name Diane Owens, but my writing name, I added his name because I do think it is a good name.
It's a great name. It's distinctive. People won't forget it. Once they meet you, they'll always remember it. I think it's a great name, and the name of the book is Love is for the Birds. It's really a fun read, a great read. What I like about the book, it really does talk about people working together, people getting together and just helping each other. And that's what's happening in whether it's North Carolina or Georgia or Florida. I'm talking to people in Florida, all my friends, they're all saying the same thing. After the hurricane, they were all helping each other. Neighbors were helping each other. Everybody was getting together. I think that's one of the nice things about your book. It shows that people can get together and work together. And it's a nice little love story. There's hope and there's joy at the end. And I think you've captured that very nicely.
Well, thank you.
Okay, Diane, it's been great talking to you. As I mentioned to you before that I'll have you back and we can talk about your other books and more about writing. But again, thank you for joining me today on Joy on Paper Live. Diane Owens Prettyman, and the website is Diane Owens Prettyman. And please get this book. It's called Love is for the Birds. Thank you so much for joining me today, Diane.
Thank you, Patsy. It was great being here.
And nice to see you. It was so much fun to talk to Diane Owens Prettyman about Love is for Birds. I hope you'll get it and discover the fascinating story of whooping cranes and a lovely little love story. Please subscribe to Joy on Paper Live so that I can bring you more interviews from fascinating authors. Thank you.
Turn the house